So I want to finish talking about basic concepts of Jacques Lacan and Sigmund Freud by discussing the Oedipus complex and talking about it with respect to Lacan and also with Freud. I do want to sort of get on with things and get beyond these smaller concepts. So let's start with Freud. First off, Oedipus. Oedipus comes from a Greek Sophocles play, or a Greek tragedy, not a play, but a tragedy written, and that it was where the subject or Oedipus, he unknowingly killed his father and took his mother as a mate, and that's sort of some some sexual thing that Freud is trying to get at, and Lacan follows him with that. So as we know with Freud, we have the idea of the unconscious, and Lacan takes a very similar position on that. Lacan tries to decenter the subject where Freud has a ego, id, and superego, just sort of centered, if you will, where Lacan takes it, he takes the subject concerning the three registers, and he decenters that subject. Where Freud has this unconscious, which is something that is not conscious in the person and is to be, I guess, understood through psychoanalysis. This whole idea of psychoanalysis to simplify what is bothering a person, or what is the cause of their behavior, and basically, lots of times, according to them, that the cause of certain behavior is that of oppression, not oppression, but repression, where stuff happens, bad things happen, and you have things that you want to do, or certain desires that you have, or with Lacan, we have the idea of jouissance, which is the pleasure or enjoyment, and we have the objet petit a, which is basically seeing something and having this fantasy or desire about it. We are either going to do that thing and have bad experiences happen as a result, or we're going to repress it and have this repressed nature about the subject, and that's going to be a dysfunctional thing as well. So when it comes to Freud, it's the Oedipus complex is simply this, and I guess Lacan more directly describes it as a triangulation, or a triangle here, and I'll explain that here. But thinking about it with respect to Freud, basically it's this unconscious sexual desire that you have for the opposite sex, that the child has for the opposite sex. So mostly referring to the male child's sexual desire for its mother, which I know can sound very messed up, but it kind of makes sense when you think about it. I mean, not that every male child feels this way, but I think also that a child will see in the parent of the opposite sex a desire directed other than that child, and that kind of causes some anxiety going on here. Whether the mother's object of desire is the father or something else, even, it's something that causes anxiety here, and that, in the male child's position, that's creates hostility towards the father, because that's there's a anxiety going on here about the mother and her object of of desire, and the child will almost think that they have to be the object of the mother's desire. Now, I honestly don't believe this, but I can see where this complex comes from. I, can see how, where a child would have some anxiety of not being the center of attention, something like that. And I think that this whole thing does occur, but not in real life. The Oedipus complex, I think, is something that is useful to look at child psychology in itself, but it's more like a metaphor, in my opinion. A metaphor of looking at child's psychology and thinking about psychology and philosophy as a whole here. So with Lacan, the Oedipus complex is symbolic structure, and it's this triangular structure where it's usually dyadic, where until the father comes in this whole thing, and the Anti-Oedipus of Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari is against the whole complex, against being triangularized into this whole thing, where in this whole Oedipal triangulation, which is from Lacan, we have the mother and the child. Usually it's mother and son, or it could be father and daughter, but it's usually mother and son. And this basically takes things from the imaginary register to the symbolic order. And the mother's, like I said, the mother's desire is directed other than the child, and the child feels this need or this obligation to be the mother's object of desire, where really the father is the object of desire, and this can lead to, in this whole Oedipal triangulation leads to castration anxiety, because of the whole thing, where once the whole thing passes, the son will have some identification with the father following this whole stage. So basically, with respect to Lacan now, the maternal figure for the son is the real other. Now, in the video before, I discussed the three registers: the imaginary, the symbolic, and the real. And the real other, or with respect to Freud, it's Nebenmensch als Ding, or neighbor as thing. The mother is this real other, and that's almost a scary, obscure, omnipotent presence here, and that can lead to anxiety and, what does she want, sort of thing. So, and the paternal figure is the symbolic and the real. He's the symbolic order, and the maternal and the paternal others. That's, it's this whole Oedipal triangle that's occurring that leads to so many issues with the child, and that leads to what Lacan calls the sexuation of the other, where in this otherness going on here, where we don't really know what it wants or a whole lot about it, the other is there's a sexuation going on, or it's being sexualized, where there is what is called a libidinal economics, or economics of the libido. And there's structural, psychical positions of masculinity and femininity, which basically are basically out of sync here. And there's this incommensurable subjective stances. So we have a lot of issues going on here, and there's much reason to, I guess, want to correct this, because there's a lot of issues with this whole triangulation, and this also leads to Lacan's concept of the drive and jouissance and the objet petit a, and that's kind of the basics of what I was going for. I wanted to get after both Freud and Lacan and their views on the Oedipus complex. I think it's very important to look at Lacan's view on it, because it looks at the opposite sex parent as other, as real other, and that leads to anxiety in itself, in the whole triangle of things. And just a little note about Deleuze and Guattari and their Anti-Oedipus. They are against the whole idea of psychoanalysis in itself, and are for schizoanalysis, where psychoanalysis is about simplifying things as to why people behave the way they do, and basically making things more easy to understand, where schizoanalysis is about complexifying things to understand the real processual and becoming like order of the world in a real way, and that has to do with things like the body without organs and deterritorialization. So, and Deleuze and Guattari have discussed how the world and, people followers of Freud and Lacan have wanted to get them in, they have this drive to get you into this Oedipal triangulation, where that you really don't belong there, and that isn't the answer to it. It's really anything. So anyway, let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below. Thank you.